This is a Dauntless Media Collective podcast. Visit dauntless.fm for more content.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Full Mutuality podcast. And welcome to February, if you're listening to this in February. I know we released this on the last day of January, but it's probably February for most of you. I know that for me, January is a really difficult month. It's a difficult month for a lot of us, and I'm pretty passionate about destigmatizing mental health. So I just want to share with you all that this is a rough time of year for me. And if you've been feeling low on energy or feeling seasonally depressed, you're not alone. This time of year is statistically the hardest for us as a society. There's a higher number of suicides. There are less hours of sunlight. And I live in Canada where it's really cold and I just want to hibernate inside. So I'm thankful it's February. We made it out. And speaking of making it out, today's episode is actually a continuation of a conversation with Janice Lagata that we started 2 episodes ago, but we interrupted to bring you our conversation with Brad Onishi. If you haven't listened to that episode, we highly recommend it. Brad's book just came out, and we think it's a must-read for anyone concerned about how Christian nationalism is infiltrating the U.S. government. Although it's not part of this conversation, it sort of ties into the topic at hand. Evangelicalism. Is it a cult? Go listen to part 1 if you haven't already, where we talk with Janice about our experiences with evangelicalism, and we introduce the BITE model of authoritarian control, which stands for, if you're not up to speed, behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. Janice suggested we split it into a few parts to allow you the time in between to reflect on your own experiences and evaluate how they might fall under these different categories. It's a lot to process coming out of a cult. We like the BITE model because it's not about evangelicalism specifically, and it can be applied to many types of high control environments. In fact, maybe like us, you didn't really think you were in a cult or are still hesitant to use that word to describe your experience. Maybe it's something you've never even considered. We know it can be a lot, so we're here to support you as you rebuild and find community on the other side of leaving evangelical spaces. Without further ado, here's our conversation with Janice.
There's so many good people in churches. There are just so many good people in the world. And it's like, you guys are going out of your way to protect and rehome pedophiles and like abusers. And it's like, why? You know, unless you just have all this empathy because you're into it or you're doing whatever. But like, it just, I'm like, cognitively, I just can't understand.
Okay, so I think what we can do is go through each one of these categories: behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. And on this website, it gives like examples under each category.
And it gives it like a lot under each category. We're not going to do everything. We're going to do more a flyby. Like do a few maybe in each category.
Right, right. So under behavior control, so I'll just list out a handful of examples. Regulate an individual's physical reality, dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates, when, how, and with whom the member has sex, controls the type of clothing and hairstyles, regulates diet, food, drink, hunger, and or fasting, manipulation and deprivation of sleep, financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. The list goes on.
This is all under behavior.
These are all just under behavior control.
Ding, ding.
Yeah, I know, right? Just check them all off.
Janice was like, I wide-eyed, like, yeah.
But the thing is, like, all of that is present. But like, if you would have read me that list when I was a Christian, when I was in Christianity, but I would have said, but nobody's making me do any of that. Like, it's all recommended, and it's just what the Bible says, though, right? Like, nobody's making me do this. I am modifying my behavior on my own.
Right.
By my own choice.
By my own free will, according to the Bible, which is interesting too, because the Bible was used as a way to take out, I almost feel like if we had to acknowledge our pastor was telling us something, then we'd have to admit we're following a person. But I almost feel like that whole the Bible says was a great way to make them have more authority while we didn't realize that they were the authority. Like it made the Bible look like that. It was like that puppet, that they had their hand inside, and it's like you're talking to the puppet. But no, it's actually them that are controlling it, because the Bible can be read in many different ways. Yeah. Even like, when it comes to tithing or how that got implemented as a teaching, right? Like 2 different churches I went to, very different on how they went about asking for money. Like one of them, they passed around a plate and the offering service was long and drawn out and like made to feel guilty if you don't, like they're watching you, okay? To see, it's a whole spectacle. And then in the other one, they didn't do that. They had like a little box in the back that you slipped it in discreetly, and they would say like, they taught it differently. There was always an encouragement to give in both, but it was done, they both believed in the Bible, but like, I don't know. It's just interesting that like the Bible, that thing we told ourselves about how the Bible we're just following, no one's making me, it's the Bible. But no, those people are using the Bible in the way that they want you to go about thinking through this topic.
Yeah. But even for example, the way that they might interpret a passage that talks about giving and donating, right? So, you in evangelical churches, in Baptist churches, in Pentecostal churches, oh man, especially Pentecostal churches, because they have a whole extra sermon during the service for just the offering time. But they might talk about the passage where Jesus comes across the poor widow who only has 2 pennies left, and she gives all of that in to the offering at the temple. And Jesus highlights that and points that out to his followers, to the Pharisees around, and then these Pharisees, these church leaders, these high profile people in the church, they show up with their bags of money that they toss into the offering, and then he says, those men have given out of their wealth, but this woman has given out of her poverty. And I've always heard that passage taught as, give sacrificially. That woman is your example to give, right? You look at that woman, and that's what Christ highlights.
She's poor and she has nothing, and she's starving and she's still giving. Then what excuse do you have?
Right.
To not give, right?
Yeah. But at a mainline church, specifically at a church that's part of the United Church of Christ.
Well, your church. Maybe other mainline. I don't know how other places teach it, but.
True. So at my church, our pastor taught that passage differently, pointing out that Jesus highlighted that woman as a way to point a finger at a system that would somehow convince her to give out of that poverty that she has. You all are giving.
They weren't even looking after her.
Right.
He's shaming them.
He's pointing out that you are giving out of your wealth to this system, and this system is forcing a woman who has nothing to give all that she has left.
And if you have all that money, how is she that broke sitting by you? Like
exactly.
Yeah, I remember hearing that from our church and being like, "What? How have I heard this taught in reverse my whole life?"
Right.
The whole time, which doesn't even make sense. Like if you look at it in context, because how does the story end? Like Jesus is about to tear this whole system down. Like his whole death is like getting rid of this. So it's like, why would he be commending the thing? Like Jesus already knows he doesn't like this system, and he's, yes, my death is going to change this whole thing. So it's like, why would he be, oh, here's how to be a part of this system that I do not like and have come to flip on its head.
Yeah.
But you've never heard it taught that way, though. You've definitely, Janice, yourself heard those sermons preached in a way to encourage you to give more,
always,
to give out of your, always. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you guys hear, this is my church experience, did you guys hear stories? Did your pastors tell stories about people who gave their last, they were running out of gas on the highway. This is sorry, I was
Yeah.
and they had like $5 and they were gonna run out of gas, and like God just told them like, give this money, and I'm gonna bless you. And they just heard a conviction in their heart, and like that, give it to that random stranger or whatever. And like they didn't feel like they could give that up, but God was testing them. And then like they gave it, and then that turned out, somehow that stop to give that person money ended up filling up their gas tank, or the gas. No, I heard one story where the gas, even though it was on empty, just kept going. Just never ran out. Like the jar in the Old Testament with the oil.
I was about to say, I feel like they stole that from
They ripped it
the
off.
story of Elisha with the...
I have heard this story. So like, did you guys hear stories to encourage you? Like, if you do this, here's what's going to happen to you. Here's how that's going to work out in your favor. And did it work? Like, did the storehouses fling open? What was you guys' experience with giving? Did it help?
No.
It didn't.
I mean...
Well, I do think some things in the Bible are true, right? Like there are, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, right? Mm-hmm. And so like I think giving as a principle is good. Mm-hmm. And I think it is healthy. Like if you have a certain amount of that you set aside to give away, I think it does do something to you, and I think it does do something for you. And I think people in the world, right, use these principles, and like to live with an open hand, to be generous is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that it can work, and it just does something to you as a person. I think to just know, okay, I have this certain amount and I'm giving it away. Mm-hmm. Like I don't like the principle of giving is good. Like it is good to be generous. So like I never regretted tithing. Like I never felt like, I get mad now thinking about it, knowing what they were doing with the money. Mm-hmm. But like, even back then I was like, well, that's not on me. I'm doing my part. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So I always kind of felt, okay, this isn't my money anyway. Yes. Now if I had it all to do over again, I would still give it, just not to the church. Right. Like I would still be happy to give this amount to something that really actually mattered, to someone actually,
that's something
cared about.
Yeah. Being outside of evangelicalism, that's something I've noticed recently more and more, is that when I feel prompted to give, it's things that get me passionate and that I'm excited about, and that I'm really like, it's like a fun thing to be like, I get to participate in this thing, and I get to tie myself into helping with this thing. And it's so exciting. And I never felt that in church. Like I would go to the AGMs and look through the budget, and I would tithe, and I would look at where everything was given to get excited about it. And even when I would present, because I was a youth pastor, and I would be at the AGM explaining how the youth budget gets spent to the donors in the church. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to convince people that, yes, you're giving your money to this is how your money is being used. But like, there's a lot in a church budget that you sometimes don't even know about, things that get lumped together, and encouragements to spend and spend and spend on church. And I don't know, like I didn't have the same passion giving to church that I have now. It's a totally different experience. There's no guilt, no pressure. It's really literally whenever I feel inspired and however I feel inspired. And it's coming from, like, the Bible they were always throwing those verses at me, like, God loves a cheerful giver. And so I would try. But it even felt like a pressure. Like, am I happy enough about giving to the church?
I need to be happy about this.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't organic. It was not really coming from the depth of within. And I think the stress that I felt to always have to give a certain percentage is something that, and I'm not saying, as a principle, that might not be a good idea to set for yourself, but there were times where I was struggling to feed my kids as a teen mom. There were and I was tithing, and I have friends who couldn't pay a mortgage and who had things repossessed because they were giving to the church. And I think through how, like that widow story, and I think through how there can be regret about giving when it was coming out of a place of feeling a pressure and where you weren't even able to look after yourself first because you were in a desperate situation. But you felt like, if I don't give to God, he's not going to bless me and take care of me. But if I give to God, then absolutely he's going to come through because he's a faithful God. And so that sort of plays into your head, and there's an expectation that God is. And then what happens if you still can't, it's still not working, and maybe you should have used those funds for yourself. Like, I think one piece of good advice I did get from an evangelical one time, I had a sponsored child through Compassion that I'd given to for many, many years. And I was broke at some point and not able to I didn't know how to make my family budget work. And I had 2 kids, and they were like, I know you're passionate and excited about helping sponsor a child. I have a different opinion on sponsored children now and how that whole system works and all the problematic stuff. But at the time I was like, I'm getting to help this other person. They're writing me letters. It's sweet. It's nice. All those commercials and propaganda, I'm not saying there's no good work that happens but there's a lot of questions I have now, learning more and more about how that encourages people to see themselves, the white saviorism, the ways that organizations have done a lot of damage through coming into countries with evangelicalism. But putting that all aside, I did have an evangelical say to me, you need to look after your family first. And I think you need to put a pause on sponsoring a child until you're, able to look after your own, there's some good principles in the Bible, taking care of your own first before. And that was a good piece of advice that I appreciated. But I still had, the reason I had done that first, and I didn't even think about it, was just you just do this. You just set aside this without thinking of if you can even afford to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That
because everything is a test.
Yeah.
Hmm?
It's all a test. And we're all, fighting the flesh all the time, right? So, of course, the worse it feels, the better it probably is for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not supposed to be easy. So
if you're sacrificing, then it means you love God more. And so the worse it feels, the more you're sacrificing.
Right. And it's probably setting you up for something great, right? Because he's testing you, and the lower you can get and the more you can sacrifice, the more he can trust you with later. So hang in there.
Yep.
Oof.
Before we get to information control, I did want to highlight one particular
something pop out at you in the behavior.
Yeah. So behavior control with regards to when, how, and with whom the member has sex. I think if there's anything that marks evangelical Christianity, it's the way that they dictate and control sexual expression, people's sexuality. I think that's one of the primary ways that evangelical Christianity exerts control over people.
And so invasively, so stuff that your answer should be none of your business. It's their business.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you masturbate last night? What? Who is having this conversation in real life except for evangelicals? Why would you be having this?
That is a conversation that I will only have with my doctor.
You have that with friends.
Oh yeah. My normal. Right, Janice?
Now, everything is open. So you're just talking with your friends about whatever, and you can joke about whatever. But it is truly information that you're offering freely,
right?
And
not because somebody's demanding that.
Not because
and nobody's questioning it. Nobody's.
It's not through an accountability partner that you're having this if anyone's listening to this and you're like, what's an accountability partner? That is a specific person you sit down with to talk mostly only about. I'm not saying maybe you don't have an accountability on something else, but if I ever heard an evangelical talking about having an accountability partner, usually the bulk majority was to discuss your sex life.
Always about sex. Yep.
Ultimately, I really think, the whole purity culture piece is the foundation. Because honestly, if you took away worrying about people's sex lives, how would evangelicalism know anything about anyone? Because you're basing your pastors on the married straight white married male. You're putting people in leadership or keeping them out based on what they're doing sexually. or what they want to do sexually, right? Like you might not even be doing anything, but you're gay, you're queer. So you can't be trusted in this area. You're never going to rise here. And it's like, ultimately, like, I think everything in evangelicalism is based on sex. And if you took that away, like if you weren't worried about who was married and who wasn't and who was doing what, and just literally had to choose people based on who knows the Bible or who is taking care of the poor, whose household is it, like,
Right.
anything else, it would all fall apart. And
yeah.
like purity culture is the thing that now like kind of lets me know, okay, who can I trust in conversation and who can't I? And you can be great and you can be decolonizing and you can be talking about whatever, but as soon as you come at me with, but yeah, sex before marriage, it's still, you're not there.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
there are some things that, no, you're still holding on to harmful beliefs.
Yeah,
it might
because
be
that
for
is-
you. Like, and if you can say that, and if you can say, well, for me, this is what, this is what I choose, but I'm fine with what anybody else is choosing to do. Okay. But if you're like, no, this is for me, and I think it is best for everyone else.
Usually when they say it's fine for me, I don't hear the second part of, and I'm fine if you don't. It's just, it's fine
Right.
for me.
No,
and that awkward
it's fine for me.
silent pause
Yeah.
of
And
like that
it's-
look in their eyes that's sort of telling you,
And it is, because secretly it is what's best for
for
everyone. And,
you
I
should be
can't,
fine with it too.
I can't judge you. I won't judge you.
I won't
But
judge.
I'm also
Out loud.
right,
out loud.
I'm not going to
Exactly.
put you in leadership. And I also,
Exactly. Yep.
I had heard, and it's a recent thought, and I haven't looked and explored it enough, but I had heard that a lot of that focus on purity culture is very tied into white supremacy because there was a big fear of mixing races. And so white supremacy has had a big role in shaping that need to control sex lives, because who you're having sex with is then controlled. And then that gives more power over making sure that the wrong people don't. I mean, there was rules about, interracial marriages and who you can marry. Like these were pieces of the purity culture stuff, like that you couldn't intermix. Those were laws on the books in the US. So like purity culture, white supremacy also have a connection, they're friends. They hang out. They need each other.
Yep.
it is. And it just puts so much shame on people. Which also, helps control behavior. But like if you think about just American history, and so even if you're talking about, okay, marriage, sex before marriage, it has to be marriage. Well, like what is marriage? Who is deciding that? So then what do you say to every enslaved person, right? Because you've already dehumanized them. You're already treating them like animals, but like also y'all can't get married. So now everything that all these people do is sin, like just for all those generations, or even up until, interracial marriage, you can't get married. So we're forcing you to live in sin. Like this is sin. Queer people, you can't get married. Like it's just this element of control that just carries on and tells people that you're inherently sinful, you're inherently bad, and there's nothing you can do about that, which is so ridiculous because like marriage, this is a governmental thing. Like this is, we have just decided this is how marriage works. When like, who's to say, like, if you want to say, marriage is a biblical idea and, whatever, well, who's to say I don't just decide, Nate, I don't know, I'm just really into you right now, and let's just be married. We're married for...
There you go. Yeah, it's all done.
I didn't
for
know
the
that.
next... I've decided to commit myself to you for now. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Like,
maybe 5 minutes from now we'll,
But
Yeah,
I've
change
had
our
those
minds.
conversations with
Yeah.
people who have had marriages without government documentation, and that's meaningful to them. And there's an actual decision and a thought process behind why they don't feel like the government should play a part in their commitment or their. And one of the people I was talking to, we'd gone through a very similar experience. I've come out of a marriage, and I know how hard it is legally to untangle. Like, anyone who's like, oh, you're getting divorced because you're taking the easy way out. I'm like, have any of you gone through a divorce to know how easy this is, or how hard and difficult a process this is to go through? Like, are you joking me? Like, I'm really strongly feeling like there needs to be laws against anyone under 25 getting married, because I got married at 17, and I'm like, your brain's not fully developed till 25, and why are we allowing people to enter into these contracts before they can even think through the kind of anyway? Oh, that gets me so passionate. Yeah. But like, it is a government. When you talked about the word biblical marriage, I'm going off now. My brain is just firing. But like, biblical marriage, I think at my wedding ceremony, because Nate and I are planning to get married, Janice, you've inspired me with your ghost writing. I think I might have my Reverend Ghost write some lines in for me, like that I might want to insert. And I think I might want her to say, Nate and Gail are not having a biblical marriage. And I want that to be like in my church being said, because biblical marriage, women were property in biblical marriages. Women could not have a divorce in biblical marriages. When Jesus was talking to the disciples about divorce, he wasn't referring to men and women, because only men had that opportunity to ditch a woman when they upset them, and that's what they were doing at the time. And he was specifically addressing that, talking about God hating divorce. He wasn't addressing women in abusive marriages. He's talking to guys who have power and who are using that power against women. So biblical marriages, I mean, there was concubines in the Bible. There was lots of stuff that was a part of biblical marriage that we just don't apply. And this whole idea of marrying for romance is a Victorian era. Like, it's like evangelicalism is a new thought. It is a new, like the rapture, it's a new thing. And we're going to stand in churches and be like, let's talk about biblical marriage. And it's like, really? That's not what you're talking about, though. Like, that is absolutely not what you're discussing, because you don't actually practice biblical marriage. Biblical marriage involved polygamy, not polyamory, but polygamy. That was involved in biblical marriages. There's tons of stories, and we don't. That's not what we're following. And people act like the Bible is super clear about this modern concept we now have, and pretend that's biblical marriage, and it's just.
And it's not at all. Like, there's not. Show me one example in the Bible of a biblicle marriage
that we call a biblical marriage now.
That we call,
like, assume is
like the one man, the one woman, who were each other's one and only, all their lives, and all their children, right, are theirs. Like, this nuclear family does not exist.
Right? No.
Doesn't exist.
Wait, what about David and Michael? Oh, wait, no. David and Abigail. Oh, wait, no. David and Bathsheba.
Oh, there was Abraham and Sarah. At least it wasn't like, and then you're like, oh, wait, but he traded her off to when he was trying to hide. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Even the ones that looked like they were only with one partner were still sharing their woman around.
Right.
Yep.
Those are your patriarchs of the Bible.
Right. And then, I'm not getting what I want out of this. So come on and let's bring in another woman, and let's, get the surrogacy going on.
That's right. That's right. No, it wasn't just, there was Haggai as well. It wasn't just Sarah. No, who am I thinking? Isaac and Rebecca, maybe? There's very few.
And Leah.
That was Rachel.
Rachel.
And that was
Jacob. Rachel.
Jacob had Rachel and Leah. There's so many of those in the Bible. They're the predominant majority of stories are not your what we call biblical marriage today.
Oh, it's a wonder. It's no wonder why they love to talk about Isaac and Rebecca, because that's really the only one that where you don't talk. They don't mention any of Isaac's other women, people. Right?
And also, it's a novel thing in any Bible story where it's not a chosen arranged marriage either, right? Like, it's not a family arrangement. It's not a, there was a lot of political, marriage was a very political thing throughout most of history. So this romantic notion we have that you're picking someone because you fell in love with them, that's not something common in the Bible. Like, it's just a rare thing to find anywhere in scripture.
Yeah. Okay. So information control. This one has like kind of an outline sort of thing. Oh, wow. This is This is a more triggering category. Okay, so
more than controlling our sex lives, Nate. What's going on?
But hey, quick question before we go on to that. So like behavior control, we have that list of things.
Yeah.
To qualify as a cult, does it have to be like check one thing in each column, or is it like check 3 things under B? You have to check 3 things under I, or is it just like you have one thing under?
Right. So I think
letter?
The way that Stephen Hassan sort of frames it, and I'm kind of just looking at the page itself. I'm sure there's way more information across the website overall, but from what I gather, any combination of these things to varying degrees is a clue that you're in an authoritarian controlled environment.
It's probably not like a school pass or fail, like if you get over 60% in all the categories, but it's probably more of this is a whole spectrum of what it looks like. So like how many of these is more a matter of you understanding how deeply, how far along on this, like how deeply entrenched it is in terms of a controlling place.
Right. Because like, we were looking at behavior control, and some of these, especially when we're inside, we're not going to acknowledge that these are things. But from the outside, having, looking back in, we might say, oh yeah, for sure, this is control, this is control, this is control. But I think there might be a way to sort of look at this and say, to some degree, yes. And if you have to ask that question, then go ahead and put a check mark there and assume that there's some kind of authoritarian control and at, again, varying levels of authoritarian control, right? Your pastor might not even be willingly or willfully exerting that kind of control.
He may not sit down with you and ask you questions, but maybe the sermons and the messages and the small group talk are centering around these topics. So there's a pressure there. Like it's important to recognize these control elements happen in different ways. It's not always a direct
Right.
monitoring.
There's one under behavior control, instill dependency and obedience, right? I mean, when I was a kid, I remember hearing, like, we would sing that song,
Read your
obedience
Bible?
is the very best way to show that you believe, doing exactly what the Lord commands,
I didn't
doing
know
it
that
happily.
one. You know that one, Janice? I don't know that one. I have the read your Bible, pray every day, and you'll grow. Wait, no, trust and obey. There's no other way.
Yeah.
Is that
Trust and
him?
obey, there's no other
to be
way.
happy in Jesus.
Right.
Trust and obey.
Yeah. So,
A lot
and
of
then
songs
that's that.
about obedience.
Yeah, and
That was
then
a big deal.
Oh, it was. It was.
Because pride's
Children,
the worst
obey your
sin.
parents.
Yeah, in the Lord, so that it may go well with you. Oh, yes. Yes, I remember being taught that, like, if you didn't obey your parents, your life would be shortened.
Your life would be,
And that was a Bible verse. But
your life depended on it.
that's intense, right? Like imagining you can die if you're not obeying your parents.
Yep.
Right. And everyone would know
Yeah.
Yeah.
that you were disobedient, like about like dying as a child.
They'd be all at your
And,
funeral
like-
being like, you didn't listen to your parents.
Yeah. Why did he die?
Why?
Didn't obey.
Right.
Didn't trust and obey.
It's awful.
And it's not like he didn't obey his parents by like running into the street and a car hit him, but it's like, your parents were micromanaging everything. Did you read that book? Did you do this? Did you get to bed on time? Like the small little minute details to have to obey. It's not like just a general principle. It was intense in how that stuff got passed down.
Yep. So information control. The first point under information control is deception. And under deception, they have these other ones, deliberately withholding information, distorting information to make it more acceptable, or systematically lying to members. Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
Ooh. So, I mean, all
You
of
two in
mine-
Hillsong, I'm just
above.
looking at you right now. Like,
All of the above. But like, we didn't know that.
you didn't
No,
know.
we didn't know.
We didn't know.
It's gonna get even more like, I mean, I think back to my time in fundamentalism. Specific, some of these are specific to Bob Jones University. Some of them are also applicable to my church. But yeah, deliberately withholding information for sure. not telling us, so pastors who go to seminary outside of the fundamentalist world, pastors who go to seminary, they learn certain things. When you learn how to read Koine Greek, when you learn how to read Hebrew, you start discovering how the Bible works, and you start finding out that the things that you're supposed to be teaching your congregation are not actually in the Bible, but then they go ahead and teach those things to their congregations anyway, because if they don't, they'll be out of a job.
Right.
But they're withholding this information from their congregations. That's one way. I mean, the fact that any seminary worth its salt will teach their students that the word homosexuality did not appear in the Bible until the English NRSV in 1946. So, but then all of these preacher boys go back to their churches and they talk about how the Bible teaches against homosexuality,
right?
A word that doesn't make its way into the Bible until 1946. So,
which is so recent.
Exactly.
Like, that's so close.
Yeah, this book that was supposedly completed 2,000 years ago.
That's only made its way there.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. And it's that one's such a tough one because you don't know until you're out and you're looking at it. Because when you're in it, you think you're getting all the information.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say to anyone, you're still somehow hanging around at Hillsong, you are seeing practically every other week how they withhold information from you and only tell you when they're forced to.
Because the news breaks it to you before they come and say it, or they break it to you right before the news is about to release it, and they know that it's coming.
Yeah.
Right. And always after they've already told you something else. Right. And we're, oh no, okay, yeah, we said that before. But that was because, whatever. And now we're telling you the full truth. They're not. They are withholding information.
Yep.
What is it you wanted me to reconcile myself to? I was born here almost 60 years ago. I'm not going to live another 60 years. You always told me it takes time. It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's and my sister's time, my nieces and my nephew's time. How much time do you want for your progress?
I hate you, naturally. And I hate black people.
Things are going to get worse before they get better.
What is presented to me as an American does not look like me.
Because you're not allowed to be a black man in corporate America.
You give us a hard time for being white and being American and being in control.
And when you live under a situation like that constantly, and then you ask me, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening right now. And you know what? We need a space where we can debrief some of it and deconstruct. If you've been looking for a POC-centered podcast that engages with intersectionality, religion, critical race theory, and some hip-hop culture, then you need to check out Profane Faith. I'll be your host, Daniel Whitehodge, and we go in every other week. So check us out wherever you find your podcasts, or check us out at whitehodgepodcasts.com to see what other platforms we're on. Cool? All right. Peace.
Hey everyone, I'm Nate from the Full Mutuality Podcast. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for tuning into this show. We're so grateful that you've decided to spend your time with us. Seriously, Dan, Gail, Jessica, Kathleen, Scott, and the rest of us here at the Dauntless Media Collective couldn't produce content like the show you're listening to without your support. I'd also like to invite you even further into the conversation. Right now, there are some great discussions happening over in the Dauntless Media Collective Discord server. If you're interested in chatting with other folks who are deconstructing and decolonizing the oppressive traditions that they came from, please feel free to hop on into the server. If you don't know what Discord is, it's a place where communities can gather online for chatting on a wide variety of topics. In our Discord server, we have channels devoted to general deconstruction conversations, some meme sharing, therapeutic venting about whatever religious bullshit you're currently dealing with, and even a channel specifically devoted to talking about the latest episodes of the podcast you're listening to right now. I hope you'll join us. You can log in directly to the Dauntless server by clicking the link in the show notes, or heading to dauntless.fm and clicking the link in the top banner. See you there.
I mean, I think a really important one in withholding information that came up recently was in the Southern Baptist churches. But I don't want to pick on them only because, I do want to pick on them because this is a big deal. But I think it applies to so many churches outside. I've seen this thing go down. Like, I know it's not just a Southern Baptist issue, but like withholding information about pedophiles or sex abusers in your church is a common thing that happens in evangelical churches with the idea that, well, we as pastors, we don't want to gossip. And we can take care of it. And we know that person, or we're working with them, or we're having these conversations with them. And the whole keeping it in-house mentality of like, move that person around to another place if something goes wrong. But you don't tell don't even tell the next place what they're receiving and what they're getting. Like withholding information, that's what popped in. I didn't go to Hillsong, so the first thing that popped into my head was sex abuse, predators in your church, and the leaders in the report that came out from the SBC. And it's not to say that every single person in that organization, there was people who exposed and that were part of doing that, but so many top leadership. I mean, that was what was so shocking about the whole thing. Knew about, many had their own lists when they were telling people they couldn't keep track. They were keeping track, and they were withholding that information. And putting people's lives in jeopardy, putting children's lives in jeopardy in order to feel like they were in charge of this situation. They had it under control. They didn't want to look bad.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago, so I'm in these different Facebook groups, survivors from the independent fundamentalist Baptist movement. And somebody pointed out that there was a church that was having some kind of special conference, and they were posting some pictures from the conference, and there was a guy that was singing in the choir who was a convicted child molester from another state, and that he's supposed to be registering wherever he goes, but he was in the choir at this conference, and so the person who shared this info with us, was encouraging us to go on their Facebook page and just remind them that, hey, we're noticing you have pictures of this convicted child molester. Are you aware that he is there? And he was a deacon at his previous church, or a pastor or something. So, people started posting on their Facebook page. They were deleting the comments. And then people started going on, I guess started to try to message them. They weren't responding to messages. And then next thing you know, they just went straight up deleted their Facebook page. Like they don't
not
want
shady at all.
They don't want people to know this guy must be on some kind of track to leadership or something. But yeah, there it is, withholding information, lying to their members.
I mean, I feel like Hillsong can tie both of those in together, not just general information holding, but how much times, was there cheating from pastors and shenanigans happening, and, you find out way, way later, but there was all this previous stuff happening before.
Yeah.
And also so much sexual abuse. And yeah, I mean, Hillsong, it's literally in the roots. It's in the foundations.
It's why he's in court
there.
Currently on trial.
Yeah.
It's like from the get-go for him and his dad.
It's from day one.
Yeah.
And again, so much of this gets tied back into sexuality. And like, to think about it, I'm like, it's just so bizarre. Like, why are there are so many good people in churches. There are just so many good people in the world. And it's like, you guys are going out of your way to protect and rehome pedophiles and like abusers.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? Unless you just have all this empathy because you're you're into it or you're doing whatever, but like it just I'm like cognitively I just can't understand.
I have a theory on this one. I feel like, so I think part of it is what you just said, a lot of empathy, a lot of people who really, just trying to be loving, or they're into it, like you said, as they're themselves are shady. But I have another opinion too. I think that teaching of like sin and how bad and horrible we are, and the sin leveling, like if that pastor, if you looked at porn last night, you're like a murderer. You do something in your heart, and it's the same as acting out in real life. So like you find out someone is a rapist in your church, and if you speak out, how dare you? You looked up. You're the same as at the foot of the cross. Yeah. All sins are equal. The sin leveling that goes on. I think people's belief in their own wickedness is very an important key to controlling people in the sense of not holding others accountable. Like I think that fear of being if you imagine yourself, and I know like I maybe because I like fascinated with cult stuff, but when I was reading up on Sovereign Grace Ministries, that one was really interesting to me. I know Joshua Harris, the one who wrote I Kissed Dating Goodbye, again, big purity culture manifesto book. But he was at the flagship church of Sovereign Grace, and they used to brag all the time about how they are the worst of sinners, as like almost being proud of talking about how unworthy they were. It was a very big talking point in how they would have like the need to constantly bring up how worthless they were. How are you doing today? I'm doing better than I deserve. It was always like about how unworthy they were. And I think if you have that perspective that you're so unworthy, then one, you can't hold anyone else accountable. But two, here's the weird thing, showing grace to someone who's done something really, really terrible almost becomes some cathartic way of trying to heal yourself. Like if I'm showering that really, like if we could turn them around just by showing them love, then there's hope for me. Like that's the Cinderella story. So like, let's find the worst person in this church and transform them through loving them. Like no practical thought to recidivism rates, to like the statistical scientific reality of certain crimes like pedophiles, and how you don't seek out the worst and then love them and just hope that because they've said they're changed and that forgiveness is going to transform them. This is like a recipe for like complete disaster, but I almost feel like it's an inner need in some of them to have that hero savior, picking the most dramatic examples that like trying to think of Paul turning, from the murderer to the
but also still very secretive, right? Because we know Paul was a murderer. And this was said. This was part of his story. Yeah. So it's like, so even if you want to lean into, well, this is empathy and we're the worst of sinners and we want to show grace and forgiveness, tell the truth.
Yeah.
So like,
why can't we be
say
out
it with
in public?
your chest? You're right. Here is this child molester.
Yeah.
And
he's
this
in
is what
row
happened
one
in his last place. Right.
Maybe don't have your kid sitting next to him.
Right. And now he's here and we have restored him in truth and love. But here, everybody, let's all know the same information and decide.
You don't need to know that information because he's never going to do it again because God has come. It's naive and dangerous.
But then it's malicious because it doesn't happen. They don't just move the person once, right?
No.
And like even if, they said, okay, this is our policy and you get a freebie, right? You just get to do something awful and then we'll move you in hope that grace and forgiveness will work. All right, that's still awful, but that's something. But like they keep doing it.
No matter how many times that person has continued.
Yeah.
Right.
So then that's when I'm like, no, there's something deeper and darker. Because you can't have it both ways. You can have grace and forgiveness, but you gotta have the truth too.
Oh yeah.
And if you're not telling the truth, there's something darker going on.
Yep.
100%.
Yep. Minimizing or discouraging access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media, critical information, former members, keeping members so busy that they don't have time to think and investigate, and controlling through cell phone with texting, calls, internet tracking, etc. Yeah. Going back to when I was at Bob Jones, I mean, they tracked all of our internet usage. I mean, to the point where they were quite clearly like micromanaging, people getting called into.
They tell you how many minutes down to the second you were on a certain page looking at a certain site that had something objectionable on it.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time they were also, they were making stuff up to intimidate. So people might come across like a pop-up and then they would say, you were on this website for like, 25 minutes. I'm like, what? No, there was a pop-up. I closed it immediately. But yeah, there's that, discouraging access to.
Were any of you encouraged to get rid of all your secular music at any point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was encouraged to get rid of my contemporary Christian music as well.
Fundamentalism takes it up the whole, like, you guys are doing this thing, we're going to take it 20 steps further.
Oh, man. Right. I remember when I got somebody gave me for my birthday, when I was in 8th grade, was it 8th grade or 9th grade? The Newsboys Step Up to the Microphone album. And
was it Contraband?
I was loving it, but
it was Contraband.
Yeah, it was.
First sign that it's bad. Mm-hmm. You're enjoying it.
That's how you know the enemy is at work. You're like, ooh, this catchy tune. That's the devil. That's the devil. Anything with a beat was the devil, apparently.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Exactly.
Ooh. Definitely.
And again, this is like, well, like you don't notice until afterwards, right? And like now you're like, oh, like, yeah, I was so busy and so wrapped up in whatever. Mm-hmm. And like nobody ever said, don't read this. But here are...
I mean, fundamentalism does that kind of... So the things that mainstream evangelical churches will be like, nobody ever said, they will find like an underhanded way or keep you busy so you don't notice those things.
Here's $5 to read.
Right.
And if you have time after to get to that.
Well, I think the fundamentalist world didn't have... I mean, they cracked down so much that even books by John Piper weren't really allowed. They called John MacArthur liberal. My church called John MacArthur liberal.
Yeah, that's a different level.
When the pool of materials to choose from is so small, they kind of have no choice but to say, don't read this, don't read this, don't watch, in fact, no TV in your home.
No TV in your home, right? Fundamentalists often don't even have TVs in their home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Can't watch the news. You cannot find out what's happening in the outside world. You just,
But again, right? This is my choice. And this is what the Lord requires.
Let's do It's Your Choice. I wasn't in fundamentalism, but they played video series explaining why Harry Potter was demonic. So did they force you? Did they tell you we're going to kick you out if you watch this? No, but they made you watch 8 videos explaining why the demons are going to get into your brain if you watch this. So they didn't have to tell you don't do it. The videos already scared you into right?
Yeah, because how much, like, if you really think about it, we can say, sure, I had a choice. I could leave. I could walk away from the church, whatever. But how much of a choice do you have? And is your choice based on your own volition? If you are afraid, at the end of the day, if you are afraid that your eternal soul is going to burn in hell, or that you're not going to be in the good graces of God, or that you're going to miss out on rewards in heaven, whatever they tell you, how much of a choice do you really have?
Yeah.
You don't.
You don't. Yeah, like the one that gets
know that yet.
Oh, that's true. You don't. The one that really gets me is discouraging access to former members. Or like,
I don't know how they did on your church. In mine, I won't say my church. I've seen this around so many Christians in the various churches I've been in, but like it's hearing it talk about bitter, angry people and root of bitterness, that kind of talk. Like, I mean, we've had people write into our podcast that are like, they had a friendly, nice tone, but like they were saying, and like that association with bitterness through saying things that are uncomfortable, right? Like, so if you're calling out anything that's not okay, it's bitterness. So it's like anything that holds anyone accountable is like a root of bitterness taking hold in you. If you're angry or bothered about things, you just need to be quiet, basically.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, talking to people who left, they're definitely bitter and angry, and you don't want to contaminate yourself by listening to people who are filled with poison in their brain. Like,
Janice, when you were at Hillsong, did anybody talk about Tanya Levin? Did anybody mention or try to discourage anybody from reaching out to her?
Yes and no. Like I was in Sydney when her book like first came out.
Okay.
And it was kind of like the Streisand effect, right? Like Hillsong does this a lot. Well, they get worried about something, and in the old days it didn't matter as much because they had so much control over people that didn't. But like they would bring up things that like most people wouldn't have known. Like if you guys didn't mention her book and you weren't so harping on it, most people would not have known about it. But like you guys keep bringing stuff up, and part of it is, I think, your guilty conscience, and then part of it is that you just so defiant, right, about being defied. Like you just cannot believe, and you just get so indignant. You just have to say something. So it's like a lot of, if you guys would just be quiet about stuff, a lot of people wouldn't know.
for
So
those
when her
who
book
don't
came
know,
out,
she was the one who wrote a book about Hillsong quite a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
right. And I remember, like, I read the book back then, and
You read it.
it was like, oh, yeah, this is true, but like
She didn't get it.
this is yeah. They're asking people for money. Yeah, they're having people serve. Yeah, like, but it's fine. Like we're choosing these things on our own. So like I didn't remember like feeling like badly towards her. Like I remember back then thinking, oh, like they're really overhyping this. Like they're giving it so much attention and they're treating her really mean. And she's just like, it's just a book. So it's just this weird thing where when you're so in it, right, like you're still justifying things. And so it's not that big a deal. And then once I left Australia, like she was never ever mentioned like at Hillsong New York. Like it wasn't even,
no, I didn't hear
world. Like it didn't. Yeah.
I didn't hear about her until after I'd left. But I think now the narrative surrounding the documentary, which I thought was funny, that Phil Dooley got all, worked up about the documentary. And at the time, it wasn't even accessible in Australia.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like they get so worked up over I'm like, why? I just assumed, oh, it must be worldwide release. Like they're so worried about this thing. And it literally was not going to Australia.
Wow.
And it's like, if you guys hadn't mentioned this, a lot of people would not have even known.
Yeah.
But you can't, again, you guys are just so defiant. You just cannot believe that somebody would say something. You just can't help but bring it up. And you make it worse for yourself. Thankfully, good. Like keep whining and complaining.
Like yeah.
It's interesting because I don't think at Hillsong, there's probably no statements like don't watch the documentary, but there's probably like, oh, there's being stuff said about us out there, and the devil's trying to
definitely 100%. That was his storyline, right? Like, no, we're under attack. We're being assaulted. These Hollywood producers, they have an agenda. They're coming after our church, and they got these angry people, and we're sorry for people who may have been hurt, but we're here are the good things we're doing. Here is look over here. But
it's only pointing out everything that's going wrong, but there's so many good things that are not being covered that we want you to focus on, and not the parts that are they're minority, or there's always the trying to
no, and they're bitter and they're angry, and these people are hurt, and they have an agenda. But
it's interesting when you we were recording a podcast yesterday with someone named Zach who He runs a podcast and he starts it with I Took Down a Mega Church. But he actually, Christianity Today, when they were covering the fall of Mars Hill, they bring him up at the end as somebody who really was a part of the collapse because he exposed the documents where Mark Driscoll
he was the one that leaked the William Wallace
where
II.
Driscoll's just writing awful things under a pseudonym. But he was the one who leaked the documents. But he ran a forum with a few people called, and they thought of what to title it. And initially it was something about we are Mars Hill. And then somebody was recommending to them who were in PR, say we love Mars Hill instead. Because, and this was the interesting thing, the people in Mars Hill were conditioned to not listen to outside voices. So they were used to hearing secular people constantly bashing the church and saying like, this place is, it's something and it's bad. So they really wanted to help people in the church by saying, we're a part of this church. We love it. We're speaking as insiders. And they had to do that. And it was a trusted resource. It was one of the few things a lot of people who went to Mars Hill would read, even though they wouldn't trust outsider sources, because it was people who loved and cared about it from within that were sharing their stories. And
right.
That's what that blog was looking to do, was just bring out those things. But it's like, it's interesting what doesn't need to be directly said to you for you to absorb that fear of like listening to other voices outside of your bubble of like, we do it. And it could be as simple as a church saying, we got it right. Like we're special. We're just kind of encouraging that whatever you're a part of has something that places out there don't get and don't have that blessing or anointing or even right doctrine. In some places they'll do that instead, depending if you're charismatic or not. If you're charismatic, it's God's blessing. If you're not, it's doctrine that you have sound.
Yep.
And those are the things where you get scared that if you leave this specific special place, that you're just going to fall into some darkness that's not going to be helpful to you. And so that fear of looking outside is hard because you've been conditioned to really see your place as the source for truth. And you're just talking about information control. And I was thinking of the different ways that that's done without a pastor saying to you, you can't listen to anything outside here. Just the ways they cast aspersion on people, make people afraid to listen.
I find this interesting. Under information control, they have encourage spying on other members.
Oh, that was your Bob Jones experience the
entire Oh yeah.
I don't know that I was a part of anything in evangelicalism where we were spying on I don't know. That wasn't part of any of my, like most of these things definitely, but this one is maybe more foreign. What about you, Janice? Anything with spying?
Well, couldn't that be accountability?
Yeah, I was about to say, couldn't that be your accountability partners? Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah, like it's not
small group prayer requests.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. Go spy on this person. But it's, did you fill out your report? How are your girls doing? What are the prayer requests? What's going on there? Who's saying what? Who's kind of tying in with that and just going back to like this idea of like, the anger and bitterness. I get so mad about John Bevere and the Bait of Satan and how that book has been used to prime people, right? So even before you leave, before you're bitter, before you're angry, while you're in church, now we have made a sin out of being offended. So now you can't
took
get
apart
your
that whole
feelings
book.
hurt. And it was so easy.
It was what's Janice, your podcast is called the one that was covering the books, the Bad Book Club? Is that that what the title of that podcast?
Bad Words.
Bad
words.
Because I know you do God is Not Given, but the Bad Words, I had listened to the one where you were covering John Bevere and that book. And that was a whole book on not being offended.
Not being offended, which is a completely made up doctrine. Like this is fake theology. It's bad theology. But this is used to control, I think, information and thoughts. Like probably like leading into that. But it's, this is one of the books, right? We're not going to say, don't read Harry Potter.
Right.
If you have time to read Harry Potter, must be nice. But have you read these books that we do recommend? And here's one. Go through this with your Connect group. And, watch out for each other. Are you getting offended? Are you upset about this? Are you, you might want to deal with that. Right.
Wow.
Or pray for my friend because she's offended about whatever. So so it's not spy on this person and tell us what's going on. This is all the best of intentions. Right? And like you guys have talked with Wes, and I remember talking with him and then just kind of laughing. So like, Wes, you're in so many people's stories and testimonies where you were like the person like trying to bring them back, right? Like trying to talk reason, or trying to, well, have you thought about this? Have you, whatever. And I think we've all been that person at some point where I've informed on people, right? Like, hey, Carl, this person they're on the fence. They're thinking about leaving. They're on the edge. They're feeling this. Best of intentions. But I was an informer. I was a spy. Wouldn't have called myself that. But
no, you're like seeing your community as the safe place. And when you see someone about to like leave it, you think maybe we can do a better job as a group of meeting whatever their needs are or whatever is missing. So you're right. Best of intentions. How that information gets used is not always within your control once you decide to share that.
Right.
Yeah. Whoa. All right. Let's try to speed through a few more of these.
2 more to get through.
I know we've got. All right. So extensive use. So still under information control, extensive use of cult generated information and propaganda, including newsletter, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, movies, music, other media, misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. Yeah. All the time. All the time. I mean, when I was at Bob Jones University, we were only allowed to listen to music by, Bob Jones University, read books from Bob Jones University Press. I mean, we could also, there were other like-minded institutions. Pensacola Christian College was one of them. Northland Baptist Bible College was another one. But outside of that, we weren't allowed to consume media from elsewhere. And they did have these strict rules about you were not allowed to listen to or watch or read stuff from other groups. Like there were certain people that were off limits to us. But then obviously Hillsong is a different story. It's the same kind of thing, but
like, so I had a different experience than you, Nate, in that I didn't have without fundamentalism. Like that's really strict. However, when you talk about cult sources or like, we had material from Focus on the Family. So it wasn't from our church. It wasn't from our church. It was like all evangelicals were getting these material, like certain evangelical organizations that just sort of had their material propagated and spread throughout all of our church. Like, how is it that I can talk to so many evangelicals across denominations? We all know who Focus on that. We all had heard some James Dobson stuff, material somewhere along. Like this was filtered into how we saw stuff. I was a part of a Bible study. It was called the Parachurch when it was called Bible Study International. BSF was the acronym, and I was so proud of this organization because it was not, it was all Christianity in my head, and then looking back, I realized it's evangelical. So sure, you have Pentecostals, you have Baptists, you have, a lot of denominations fit under it. And I thought, wow, what a broad reach, because when they're covering a passage or a topic, they're going to bring into different perspectives. But different perspectives, I think this is part of the trickiness, different perspectives still within a framework that fits a very narrow perspective. So there was a lot, even as I was studying the Bible so regularly. I mean, this was a Bible study where you had to do homework every day. To be like, that's how committed you had to be. You had daily homework to do in homiletics each week when you were in leadership. And I was at that, but like, and I was like, wow, I'm getting, such a wide, a bigger, because it's not just my denomination. It's, look how many churches are represented. This wasn't run by my church. It was run at a church, and it wasn't run by that church. It was just run out of. And it was like a parachurch organization, they called themselves. But like, none of the Catholics were in leadership. Any Catholics that attended this Bible study were not invited into leadership. Yep. And they had evangelical stances on, if you were supportive of homosexuality, you couldn't be in leadership. Like it was an evangelical Bible study. And it took me a while to recognize that I was studying the Bible so much, but through an evangelical lens. And I thought it was bigger than it was because, again, the word denomination could make us feel like it's broad, but evangelicalism is a very narrow subset, and it includes many denominations. So
yeah, the differences between the denominations are minimal.
Yeah, it's like,
They're
oh, we
very
don't agree
small.
on speaking in tongues, or maybe we have differences on how we baptize, or like such minuscule things, but then like all the other stuff lines up very well.
Yeah.
You know, very, very well.
Yep. Ugh. All right.
Next topic, Nate.
That wraps up another episode of the Full Mutuality Podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. And if you don't already have one, head over to our website, fullmutuality.com, for a list of all the apps you can find us on.
We couldn't do this without you, our listeners, so thank you so much for your continued support. Speaking of support, one of the best things you can do for us is to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review.
I'm pretty sure 5-star reviews get you an extra crown in heaven.
But seriously, if you found this episode insightful, spread the word and share it with your friends.
And don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Full Mutuality. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Full Mutuality Podcast.